This is Melissa, and it is the second day of November 2025, and I hope that you are all doing well. I have been busy, as I said, with some big projects and also book club, and this week with Graham and Gabriella, Faith and Trevor, I was part of the group that presented, so that was extra preparation and fun, though. I have to say that we think, or as Graham said, it's a wee miracle going on over here. And I think that's true. There are people, as I mentioned today on the recording, there are people who have actually met face to face, going from one country in Europe to another. And I know of 3 of such meetings now. So, and collaborations and opportunities for people to express themselves creatively, and I like it. I'm pleased to see this. So I wanted to bring you something. I had a few things I wanted to say and to share with you, but I also am doing this again late on Saturday night, and so I'll probably just put a few images here, not much, and get this ready to post for you on Sunday. Last week, I posted a talk from Alan Watt, June 7, 2007, New Order Schemes to Track Your Dreams. This featured an article that Alan was reading from by a journalist, Mark Baard. And I couldn't find the article. I chose the talk kind of last minute, and then I couldn't find the article up. And so I put up a couple of other Mark Baard articles on RFID. I was looking around this evening for something to put up because I hadn't had time to think of it until tonight. And I got a message from Mark Baard. And he said that, he appreciated me linking to his work. And I was happy to hear from him. We hadn't connected in quite a while. And so it was good to hear from him. And I was just saying, let's catch up, and we're having a back and forth. And so I wanted to tell you just a little bit about Mark. He has been a journalist for years, based in the Boston area. And he's published his work in a variety of places, including the Boston Globe and the Register and Wired magazine and many other outlets, and he taught journalism for a number of years. And I asked him this evening, I said, I remember, there was a connection that Alan, it was somehow connected to the early part of your career, and he said he was already working as a journalist. I'm just going to look at that. He said, I was already writing, but I encountered Alan through an interview he did at Red Ice Creations, produced by Henrik and Fredrik Palmgren out of Gothenburg, Sweden. Alan was talking about Yahoo throttling his internet stream, which made sense to me, even as my editors and corporate spokesman scoffed. And so I want to share this article. This is from March 2007. Conspiracy theorists. Feds, web hosts conspire against us, and the Illuminati are in on it too. When Alan Watt's website, Cutting Through the Matrix, went offline in February, he knew it was because someone, quote, at the top, end quote, decided he was getting too close to the truth. Watt is one of several esoteric researchers, call them conspiracy theorists, who believe Big Brother is telling Yahoo, Google, and other companies which websites get to stay up and which come down. I am certain of it, said Watt, a researcher studying the role secret societies play in global events. Yahoo's web hosting division, which provides services to Cutting Through, pulled the site without explanation after Watt posted an audio blurb about the CIA's links to drug traffickers and the 1980s crack epidemic in Los Angeles, he said. Yahoo, lifted the suspension, again without explanation, about 3 days later, according to Watt. It may not be the worst thing Big Brother has done to Watt. Paramilitary forces once plunked a phosphorus grenade down his chimney, he claims. But there are many other anti-Masons and 9/11 truthers claiming that sinister forces and the Internet's big boys are de-indexing and suspending sites that threaten to expose the global ruling elite. It sounds loopy, but the allegations from the webmasters of sites such as Prison Planet and the Illuminati Conspiracy Archive have persisted since late last year. The conspiracists suspect Western intelligence and law enforcement agencies are using subtler means to curtail anti-government content because, unlike Vietnam and China, for example, they cannot overtly censor bloggers, vloggers, and podcasters. A Prison Planet article last October reported a claim that Google, which hosts videos and blogs through its subsidiaries, is, quote, in bed with the CIA, and that you have targeted websites for blackout. The site also accused Google Video of trimming the viewership statistics for Terror Storm, a film that argues that many attacks against America are government-sponsored false flag operations designed to get people to relinquish their freedoms. Of course, the site suspensions, YouTube ranking changes, and search engine de-indexings may simply be the result of technical errors, as claimed by the service providers. Lazy workers in an increasingly Sovietized Western economy are surely to blame for some of these problems, says Henrik Palmgren, who runs the website Red Ice Creations. Red Ice features podcast interviews with esoteric researchers, including Watt, and news updates from bloggers and the mainstream media. Red Ice earlier this month was suspended by its hosting service, One.com, in a knee-jerk reaction to a spam message that linked to Red Ice but did not originate there, said Palmgren. At least that's what the provider told Palmgren. Watt suspects he is the real reason for the Red Ice blackout. You see, Watt made an appearance on Red Ice Radio just days before One.com suspended Palmgren's site. As for cutting through, Yahoo spokeswoman Kristen Wareham refused to say if the company has ever pulled or edited a website under pressure from U.S. intelligence or law enforcement agencies. But many Internet services are also U.S. government contractors. Google provides geospatial and other search services to the government through its enterprise division. It seems logical, therefore, to presume the companies have a motive to cooperate with any government Internet data mining operations. Prison Planet last year reported the claim that the CIA once provided seed money to a young Google. The spy agency is currently supporting dozens more startups to help it troll the Internet for content that might reveal plots against America by its enemies. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to see the government wants access to as much information as possible, said Nicole Ozer, Technology and Civil Liberties Policy Director at the American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California. Ozer was one of the few civil libertarians to question Google's recent promise to anonymize its users' identities after 18 months to 2 years. She asked if Google is actually capitulating to government requests to keep more data for longer, rather than limiting access to its records, as the company's announcement implied. Ozer fears that web hosts and search services will use their terms of service agreements as an excuse to suppress bloggers in the run-up to the 2008 presidential election. The terms of service are very broad, and companies are pretty free to interpret them any way they want, Ozer said. She recommends shopping for a web hosting service with a hands-off policy toward legally protected speech. Google's Blogger makes no such promises. The service reserves the right to remove any content at blogspot.com it considers objectionable, according to its terms of service. Google's lawyers review all complaints about the content of Blogspot blogs and contact bloggers whose websites they've edited or deleted. If we have their current contact information, said Google spokeswoman Victoria Grand. There are no spooks taking up cubby space at Google. nor is there a red phone that rings with calls from the government objecting to the blogs and videos on its websites, Grant said. We treat all complaints about content exactly the same, whether or not they come from someone in the government. Yeah, I'm sure that's true. U.S. Department of Homeland Security spokesman Larry Orlesky also said he doubts DHS has ever asked a company to remove, alter, or suspend a site for its anti-government content. But Alan Watt is taking no chances. He has been setting up mirrors for cutting through the matrix since February in case the cyber spies decide to strike again. Well, I'll say a couple of things. I keep those mirrors going, and I have also created a lot of video sites and the Substack, and I just put as much of my own content and Alan Watt's content as I can everywhere. The other thing that I'll say is that the article that Alan was reading from Mark Baard last week covered Homeland Security and the chips. Now, what happened here is that Alan and Mark Baard developed a friendship, and Alan subsequently featured many of Mark's articles over the years. And Mark said to me tonight, he said, by the way, the book Gary Webb wrote about the CIA South Central crack connection was required reading in the journalism class I taught at the time. After that, I started listening to Alan regularly, and as a reporter, put everything he said, quote, to the test, end quote. It's always proved accurate. From there, Alan's work began to inform my work, and that is why I owe my career to him. Now, I owe Not Sure to Mark Baard, the writing that I do under the name of Not Sure. After Alan passed away, I, felt the need to say something. I didn't want to speak publicly. I was in grief and shock still, and it just wasn't time for me to open up my mouth, but I did have something to say, and I wrote something, and then I called Mark up and said, could you read this for me? And he did, and he made a couple of suggestions, and then I wrote something else and sent that to him. And he said, you have a voice. He said, you can teach people structure and grammar, but you can't teach people to have a voice. And really that was just great encouragement for me, because here is a real journalist who has written for years at great publications and is teaching and said I had a voice. And that's really the encouragement that I needed to start writing. And so, as he says he owes a lot to Alan Watt, I owe a lot to Mark Baard. And so I wanted to say that. I didn't mention him last week because we hadn't connected in a long while. And, okay, so just think about the article that I just read to you. Some people might not be safe to be associated with. I'm always respectful of that. And I thought, well, I will catch up with him soon. But since I caught up with him today, I am saying aloud to you that I really appreciate the work of Mark Baard over the years. And I also appreciate the help that he has been to me and, of course, his friendship with Alan. So, one other thing I want to say about this article here. On the previous page, I'm going to go back here. And, okay, so Mark writes, it may not be the worst thing Big Brother has done to Watt. Paramilitary forces once plunked a phosphorus grenade down his chimney, he claims. So that did happen. And worse, and lots of things. I've told people before I could talk for probably a few hours about things that were done or threatened to be done to Alan and subsequently to me on my own. It's very real, but Alan once said, you just can't talk about these things because people will say you're paranoid or you're crazy or, So I don't talk about most of that either. I mentioned this. Nick Hayes from Hayes Reviews has had, some weird things happen on his live stream lately. And he's been troubleshooting all of the possibilities that would make his sound break up. And it looks like he has really addressed everything, done quite a lot of troubleshooting. And I was listening to his live stream on Friday, and for about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, it was smooth sailing. And right at the moment, and I was sitting there, I heard it and I saw it, right at the moment that he said, well, this stream is going smoothly today, it began to break up and it degraded from there until it became impossible to listen to, and he had to call it off for the night. And one wonders, that's all I'll say, one wonders. So just a couple of other things that I want to mention quickly. I don't think I've told you yet which of Alan's talks is going up again as a Redux. This is from April April 14, 2008. While inflicting torture and pain, our masters make hay for financial gain. The end of morality in the new corporate feudal system. And this is an interesting talk because Alan took a lot of calls. There's some interesting calls throughout. And he didn't always have time to take calls or make the time to take calls. But in this one, it looks like he had 4 callers. Now, some people say that they prefer the talks where he doesn't have any callers, and I get that, I understand that. But I always find when he takes a caller, he may go someplace that he would never go otherwise because of something that the caller says or asks. And also, it's instructive in how he might handle a difficult caller or a caller who is at a very different level of understanding, maybe new to the material and so forth. But I wanted to point this last caller out to you. And he's a caller by the name of Smokey. And he and Smokey talk about a few things, and the call is this gone on for a little while, and then Smokey just puts him right in the hot seat, and he says, "Are you in Christ, sir?" And Alan said, "Well, I have a different definition from a cultural Christianity. Put it that way. I don't go along with." And the caller interrupted and said, "Are you born again? You know what I mean by that?" And Alan said, "I've had my own experiences, put it that way." And Smokey said, "Yes, I mean, how can you be born again unless you're dead to sin? You know what I'm saying." And Alan said, "If you look around you, you'll see most folk are dead because they've never been conscious." Smokey said, "Well, we're dead the same. We think with immunity before we're born again, I think, once you realize." And Alan interrupted him and said, "The fact is, as I say, most people in today's society have never been conscious. They've been brainwashed since birth." Caller says, No, nobody's born a Christian." And Alan said, "Yes, yes, yes." Smokey said, "No one's ever born a Christian." Alan said, "Thanks for calling in." Smokey, "Wait a minute, hold on." So Alan then goes on. I'm going to read this. You'll hear it, but I bring this up for a particular reason. He said, "Thanks for calling in. Bye now." We don't need religious indoctrinations from any particular group. And the problem with most cultural Christians is they want you to have exactly the same ritual and pattern as they have themselves. That's the problems with religion. Unless you're identical with the same formulas, and it's just formulas, they don't hear what you're saying. And what you're saying could be closer to a truth than they've ever experienced themselves. And it could be closer to the more ancient truth, because modern Christianity is so remote, especially American Christianity. It's so remote from early Christianity that the early Christians wouldn't recognize being in America at all, because it's wrapped in a new type of commercialized culture and a completely different system. People were, quote, born again long before Christianity came along, and that's what people should realize as well. It was an ancient saying, the born again phenomena, and it always meant you were born into consciousness, meaning you had to have obviously been dead before. That's what it meant, and that's why it says in the New Testament, let your dead bury your dead. And they're all scratching their heads and saying, well, what does he mean? It meant those that were walking around, but they're not really conscious. They're technically dead. Back with more after these messages, he said. And I bring that up because I've gotten into it. I've gone places talking about Alan and quoting from his own words, his own writing, and the things that came out of his mouth. Yes, I can add plenty of my own personal experiences and observations. But I have gone out of my way to point out some of these nuances. Did Alan say that all religions are created for purposes of control? Yes, he did. But just listen to this conversation with Smokey. This is someone who, Alan, has had an experience. And any time I find that I open up my mouth, as I did with Nick in the Real History this week, Paralandra, the acid trip, and the conversation that I had, which was intended to be a private conversation, at the suggestion of Nick, that I record the conversation with the theologian Greg Gorsuch. And I asked Greg if I could do that. He said yes. And then, I'm sweaty after my morning walk in a T-shirt. And Nick said, well, maybe Greg would let you publish that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll ask. And yes, Greg did let me publish it. But the trouble with certain conversations is that people will go where they go. And the sad thing about it is what people fixate on, because I can tell you that from my point of view, what was discussed in the conversation with Nick and with Greg and the follow-up that we had in book club today. I mean, Greg Gorsuch was part of that book club conversation, because these ideas that, as Alan said, predate Christianity. What does it mean to be born again into spirit? But, people land where they land, and that's where they stay until it's time for them to move on. But one can't do that for them. And so in this, call with Smokey, Alan just said, thanks for calling in. Smokey said, wait a minute, hold on. No, don't think so. An interesting thing about the book club and Waiting for the Miracle is Alan said straight up with Jackie, who had a predominantly Christian audience, we're not taking calls. And I mean, there were a few, but, and even in the three calls that they had over that series of interviews, you had the people, with their accusations, because you don't see things the way they see things, or your interpretation is different than their interpretation. And Alan really didn't have a lot of time for that. And frankly, I don't either. This, one of the things, the thread the through line of a lot of Mark Baard's work in that period between, and he did stop a while and raise a family and, do some different things. But that time between the early 2000s up until around 2012, 2014, Mark Baard was very busy writing about technology and writing about some of the dangers and potential, danger is a good word, of technology. And many of the things that he wrote about and warned about are here, and they are in common everyday usage. And so I say, I don't have a lot of time to mess about, because it's quite clear that we are in a place now where this incorporating us all into their little Borg system it's here and it's upon us. So the very end caller, the very last caller, I thought it was Smokey, but no, hey, it's Bob. And Bob wanted to talk about George Bush went to Israel. So this is that year, 2008. And he participated in a Masonic black mass at Zedekiah's cave with the head of the Sanhedrin and the top-ranking Jewish officials. And they gave him a parchment that was made from ancient parchment, in which they addressed him as the esteemed George W. Bush, the chief prince of... there's a typo there in the transcript, but it's the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. And Alan said, really? He said, I don't know where this came from, but is there any proof of it? And Bob said it's on their website. He didn't say exactly whose website. But so, as it turns out, there is a document. I'm going to link to it. And I'm also, make of it what you will. I'm still not, we don't know. But a writer said that this happened, and there were 3 rabbis who met and said that George W. Bush was, it offers Mr. Bush a clear choice. They've addressed him as the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. They're saying that Mr. Bush is currently fulfilling his role. He can still decide to either reject the role of Gog and be counted among the truly righteous, on a par with Cyrus of Persia, who authorized the first regathering of Israel, and Lord Balfour of England, whose Balfour Declaration paved the way for the second by defending Israel's right to the land God gave them, or continue to accept it and willfully aid in Israel's destruction under the guise of peace and be inscribed for eternal disgrace. So I'm going to put up a couple of other side articles, one from 2009, and this is from The Guardian, Bush, Gog, and Magog, and another one from a paper called Firm Israel, and this one is from this year, July of 2025, How War with Iran and Hamas May Fit Within Bible Prophecy. What does the Bible say about war in the last days? So I will also let you know that Israel says ceasefire back on after strikes kill more than 100 in Gaza. Now, was anybody surprised to see Israel break that ceasefire? Okay, well, not me. More than 104 people had been killed, including more than 40 children and 20 women. So more than half of the people killed were women and children. And he said that this is a spokesman from the Palestinian Health Ministry, said that more than 250 people, including more than 70 children, were also injured. This is what, I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit. This is what President Donald Trump had to say about it. He supported Israel's actions, telling reporters on Air Force One, the Israelis hit back, and they should hit back when that happens because of, it's an incident that the IDF said happened that Hamas denied, who knows. But So still, Donald Trump maintained that the truce in Gaza was not at risk, adding that Hamas was a very small part of peace in the Middle East. Now, this is Trump. Now, does this not sound to you like you're a 5-year-old being taught to you? They said they would be good, and if they're good, they're going to be happy. And if they're not good, they're going to be terminated. And then Vice President J.D. Vance similarly maintained that the ceasefire is holding, adding, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be little skirmishes here and there. Okay, so the death of, 40 women and 20 children. Did I get those numbers right? 40 children, and 20 women is a little skirmish. So that's the world we live in. That's enough from me. And I hope, again, that you are all well. And I'll be back. So take care. Bye.
I'm Alan Watt, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on April the 14th, 2008. I hope I'm on the air because we had 2 false starts here. And all I heard was phones ringing once the studio hookup came. So I hope I'm on the air, and I'll continue as though I were. And newcomers look into Alan Watt Sentinel.eu for the transcripts you can get from the various languages of Europe. Some people have been working hard trying to get transcripts up there, and there's more coming in. You can download them and print them up, pass them around, and also look into cuttingthroughthematrix.com and download lots of the previous shows, which have lots of information which help to tie this massive jigsaw puzzle together. The pieces are scattered, and that's how you've been taught to see them in bits and pieces all over the place, unrelated, but it's all from the same jigsaw board that's been cut up, and you have the illusion of it being scattered. It's all very coordinated in reality. We're living through the greatest changes in history, probably, because never before have so many sciences come together quite a long time ago and become a sort of dominant elite, a new type of religion where their theories become the gospel truth and are treated by that as by those in the top. All these theories come together, and you have a big technocratic elite at the top too, working with big institutions, big foundations, and the elite above government, the supra-elite, people who may have been in politics, not all of them, but some have been in politics, even prime ministers and presidents who create up this parallel government, as Margaret Thatcher called it, and they all interact with each other, creating this. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, and we're back with Cutting Through the Matrix. There's odd things happening at the studio when I go on, because the phone seems to be going in a loop somehow, and we've had odd things happen before when everybody ends up talking like Donald Duck or the Dalek, and I don't know what causes it. I don't think they can find out either. But who knows, maybe there's bigger powers playing games on some server or something. But I'd like to talk about what happened not long ago with the torture incident that we're all filled with in the news. And this is from Strut Online. It's part of the Detroit Free Press. Also under, I think it comes under freep.com. And this was April the 12th, 2008. It was written. This is What Torture? We Went Shopping. It's well worth reading, by Leonard Pitts, Jr. It says the Iraqi prison was the epicenter of an international scandal in 2004 when it was revealed that U.S. soldiers were mistreating detainees, forcing them to stand in stressed positions, sexually humiliating them, menacing them with dogs, denying them clothes, dragging them on leashes, threatening them with electrocution. All of it was captured in photos that shocked the world, One of the most memorable showed then 21-year-old Amy Private Lindy England, the cigarette poking from an idiotic grin, index fingers caught like guns as she pointed to the genitals of a naked Iraqi man. We stared at those images and asked how this could have happened, how American soldiers could have become so degraded and undisciplined, could have wandered so far afield from the moorings of simple human decency. Many answers were proffered: mob mentality, dehumanizing conditions, lack of oversight. But as the years have passed, a truer answer has coalesced. Where did these young soldiers get their ideas that the rules were suspended, that free rein was given, that they could do whatever they wanted to the men in custody? It came from the top. The latest proof, a recently declassified 2003 memo from John Yoo, that's Y-O-O, then a Justice Department lawyer. The memo was eventually rescinded by Justice, authorized torture as a means of interrogation, a finding that carried the force of law. Much of the media coverage of the 81-page document has focused on the, and this world is unavoidably ironic, bloodless legalese in which Yoo contemplates the permissibility of putting a prisoner's eyes out, slitting his tongue, scalding him with water, dosing him with mind-altering drugs, disfiguring him with acid. But what is also appalling is Yoo's contention, repeatedly restated in the memo, that the president in times of war, enjoys virtually unfettered authority over and is accountable to no one for the treatment of prisoners. Legal scholars have accused Yoo of sloppy reasoning. Eugene Fidel, who teaches military justice at Yale and American universities, told the International Herald Tribune the document was a monument to the imperial presidency. Yoo disagrees. He calls the memo a boilerplate defense of presidential authority. It's like something out of the Middle Ages, really, isn't it? And we forget, for all our sciences and our so-called advancement in technology, that the human mind, especially with those who crave power, has never changed at all. To continue, your humble correspondent doesn't know from legal scholarship. He does know this. 7 years ago, when the nation was attacked and Americans wanted to pitch in, wanted to help, wanted to sacrifice, our leaders told us to go shopping. Now, do you remember that? That came out the next day. In Canada, Britain, and the U.S., the tops of certain departments. In Canada, it was Alan Rock, who was the justice minister at that time, told us to go out and be patriotic and shop, and keep the economy going. The same thing happened in the States. We were told to do the same thing. That was being patriotic, go shopping. And we did. Nor, scared as we were, eager for the illusion of security as we were, did we look too closely or examine too intently the things that were being done in our names. We became, many of us, expert at ignoring the screams from behind the curtain, discounting the growing mountain of evidence that things were not as we'd been told, brushing off nagging questions about what we've become, and how that does not square with what we are supposed to be. We shopped and did not fret over much about the price of our moral laxity. Maybe that's because the price is paid in tiny increments of our national honor, yet somehow never by those who most deserve to foot the bill. So that 7 years later, George W. Bush is still President of the United States, Donald Rumsfeld is working on his memoirs, John Yoo is a law professor at UC Berkeley. But Lindy England is a single mother, on parole and looking for work, living in a trailer with her folks. And that's a little article there, but it's got a little punch in it, because we have to ask ourselves, how come? How come? What has degraded society to this extent that people can be made to do these things so easily and actually perhaps even enjoy it? I said years ago that a generation was growing up being conditioned with military-type indoctrination through video games, which were used for the military. They were invented for military use to desensitize people from horror and the horror of war. And it's been done. We've also had the complete abandonment of all traditional morality. Traditional morality, family, community, and nation has been under attack for over 100 years, primarily coming out of the culture creation industry, as we lap up one movie after another and then emulate what we see. We emulate the characters, just as we do with music. It sinks in. It sinks in. And we become the new culture that we're programmed to be. It's not something to be terribly proud of. And they're on a roll, of course, because they must bring 100 years' war, 100 years' war, to its culmination, so that maybe 1 or 2, perhaps 3 at the most generations, if you take 30 years as a maximum of functional use within their system, 3 generations to come to a pre-planned new type of society, a global society, that will be so remote in every detail from the present society that those people in the future, if they can think at all for themselves, which is highly unlikely actually, would find it very little to compare with their own in this present one. There would be no such thing as marriage at all. There would be no such thing as having children because you want to. You'll work and serve the state, and you'll be new types of creatures in 100 years. You wait and see. Shortly they'll be introducing different kinds of humanoids, specially designed for specific tasks. And after all, if humanity with all of its flaws and its problems is not worth hanging on to, then there's nothing to fight for. And that really is the big question for those who have woken up. You have to revise everything you ever thought about, everything you ever knew about, and ask yourself, is it worth keeping a hold of, or should we find an alternate way? We can't go the way that the planners have determined because it's death for most folk. Even if you're still alive, you'll be brain chipped like a zombie. You won't be unhappy because you won't know what unhappiness is. You won't have the ability to even feel unhappy. So we have to really decide what it is we're fighting for and what is worth fighting for. Now, most of the things that we used to fight for have already been destroyed. If we go back 200 years, we find on the list of various manifestos, including the communist one, including the elitist one in Britain, the so-called opposition of communism, they wanted to eliminate the family unit because people stood up for their families, which were just small clans, and they would help each other out, but they definitely stand up for each other. And governments don't like anyone standing up when they go for a target. We have to figure out what is worth saving and what is not, but certainly we must find a new way. And if we're all fighting each other, we'll all go down the big whirlpool and down the drain together, as those at the top gleefully watch on. Now I'm going to go to the phones and we'll see who I've got. We've got Keith from Dallas. Are you there, Keith?
Good evening, Dr. White.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. If you can hear my daughter, I apologize because she's kind of loud and unvaccinated. Anyway, Dr. White, I wanted to, I appreciate the conversation you're talking about right now, and I wanted to say that what never occurs to people is that, I remember that Abu Ghraib incident, of course we both know, everyone saw the pictures. What it never occurs to people is that it could very well easily be Americans that they're doing this too. And that never dawned on us. And that's what I wanted to call about, because my head is about to explode. Just being out here in the land of the dead and blind is so incredibly tasking, because it's hard for me to just relay even a simple thought that I have with just the average person.
Yeah.
I mean, you should have seen the media. Well, you should have seen the sheep out here in North Texas. They were dancing around the fat calf about a month ago.
I'll tell you what to do, Keith. Hold on, and we'll talk about this after the break. Hi, folks. I'm Alan Watt, and we're cutting through the matrix here. And we have Keith from Dallas on the line, and you can hear his frustration as he explains the people around him and how they're reacting or not reacting to the current situations. Go ahead, Keith. Yeah.
Okay, thank you again. About a month ago, the media had their usual 4-year frenzy with the primaries, and of course it was sickening, okay? I mean, I wish I would have had time to go to Denton to ask Chelsea just one question like, well, you know, since your father was the real butcher of Serbia along with General Wesley Clark as opposed to, you know, the purported butcher Slobodan Milosevic, don't you think your mom is going to slaughter at least 4 times as many people, especially since she's so much for gun control? And I'm sure I probably would have been subjected to an incredibly vicious audit by the IRS or whatever, and, you know, we all know how that goes. Mm-hmm. But speaking of Bill Clinton, Dr. Yeah. Sir? I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
I said, or worse, yeah.
Oh, yes, sir. Speaking of Bill Clinton, and the Kyoto Accord and weather warfare and all the green, the other night, Dr. Watt, there was an incredible amount of microbursts all over North Texas. And so that morning, when the sun finally came up, the media, of course, had another frenzy with it, and they showed us about a couple of million broken trees, maybe a few turned over cars or whatever. And so after about a good day or so, here comes the clincher. The city of Carrollton is urging its citizens to conserve power. Mm-hmm. And so I'm telling people, don't you see what's going on?
Yeah.
And, I mean, I was talking to this guy, he's about 56 years old. And we're talking about Charlton Heston. And so they ran a piece on ABC or one of the shows here, one of the local stations, talking about Charlton Heston. And essentially it was about, it looked like they were just advertising, you know, Ben-Hur and 10 Commandments and Planet of the Apes. And then they wanted to, I guess, talk bad about him in the fashion that they showed that they presented the information about him being in the NRA, but my point was there was not one mention about the movie Soylent Green.
Yes, yeah.
Nothing.
No, it's a bit too close to home, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's what I keep telling people. I'm like, the television, do you know out here in North Texas, I don't know if I'm sure it's statewide because it's a law. There's going to be a law in February of 2009 that you have to have a digital box or a digital television or you won't be able to catch the TV signal. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just asking people, why do you think they're making this a law?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like everything else. This is the same technique over and over. Once enough people have it, they make it a law.
That's exactly right. And in fact, they're starting to in 2009 in the U.S. The Homeland Security has drafted up a whole new bunch of procedures. It's very important because it's called the Western Hemisphere project for travel for American citizens. You also require permission to leave the country, never mind get back into the country. And so the borders are going to become your gates, basically, your fences. And I think people should start realizing that they should look at things from every angle and not just the way it's presented to them. Most folk think it's just to do with traveling abroad. It's to get out of the country. If you have to, you can say no.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, that's something else. All the people around me with their houses, with their flags, and on their cars, and I'm just like, you know, there is no United States.
No.
You know, and another thing, you call yourself a patriot, you can't use the Constitution to defend yourself.
Yeah.
And then what were you talking about? Well, since you like judge shows so much, why don't you research a case, Potiphar Bay and Company versus the mayor and alderman of the city of Savannah, and then tell me if you can use the Constitution to defend yourself. And so I'm telling people these things, and I'm just...
I don't know. A guy at the FBI, training camp or place there in the States sent me... he trains the FBI, he's a sergeant there, and he sent me a bunch of stuff that's given to all their officers, including the lower police officers, And it states right on it that anyone who's quoting the Constitution is to be regarded as a potential terrorist.
Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I guess by definition, we're all terrorists because we're against global governance.
That's exactly right. In fact, that's what was said by Kissinger. Kissinger was asked when he was over in, I think, China. He says, you've all heard about terrorism, and he says we should classify or define how we classify terrorism. He says, in the United States, a terrorist is someone who is anti-globalist.
This guy just doesn't go away. How old is he, like 84, 83?
Yeah, well, they must keep growing him new hearts and lungs and kidneys, I think, yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me. One more thing I want to touch. The media ran a story out here about how if you refuse, now I don't advocate drinking and driving, all right? But the story itself, the media ran a story talking about if you refuse to take a breathalyzer in the field, that they are going to drag you downtown to take your blood.
Mm-hmm.
And what they don't tell you in the story, of course, and we all know this, is that if you refuse to go downtown, then of course they're going to kill you.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Yeah, they'll at least taser you a few times. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's what kills me is how they always show these police after they've killed someone, and they get paid time off, of course. They show them and then they say something like, well, I had a family to think about it. I had my own family, my family. Mm-hmm. So you killed someone else, never mind the fact that they have a family, never mind the fact that, so it's just...
And they also get counseling. They get counseling on the taxpayers' expense to help them deal with the killing of someone else, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Baard. It's been great talking to you again.
Thanks for calling. Back after these messages. Hi, folks. I'm Alan Watt. This is Cutting Through the Matrix. And we've got Joe from New York City on the line. Are you there, Joe?
I am. Thanks for taking my call. I have to admit that I'm newly awakened. And I have to say sheepishly, I guess I liked my life a little bit better before.
Yes.
I knew of...
ignorance is bliss, right?
That's what they say. But no kidding, though. It's easy for me recently to get saddened, almost depressed by all this. I mean, it just doesn't look like anything worth like you opened the show with, worth looking forward to.
Yeah.
How do you stay up? How do you not let that get you down?
It's a matter of knowing that there's always hope as long as some of us can still think and express our views that gets through to other people, because eventually waves are formed, big waves are formed from small ones, and all we can do is divert the course we're on. Who knows where we'll go, but we can't go along the one that's been programmed out for us, because we know where it's supposed to end up, and we don't want to go there. So as long as there's hope there, we can do something about it. The problem is that everyone individually has to go through their own personal battle, because you will go through in a circle. You'll realize that the old structures have been almost completely destroyed, not totally everywhere, but mainly destroyed. The bonding between society and members of society has also been pretty well destroyed by design, and we have to try and get some of that back and stop fighting each other, to realize that if we're going to come out of this at all, we've got to stand up to it and stand up to the evil that's being done right now in many different areas. And believe you me, it's through the school system, it's from kindergarten onwards, it's through the inoculation programs. We have the statistics here. I just read one recently from Utah where the Mormons never had their children. None of them have ever had a case of autism. It's unknown. As far as I'm concerned, that's the proof right there. And we're being sprayed from the skies too, like bugs. And we got to stop all the scientific tinkering with our bodies, because it's on a massive scale right now.
It is, and it's amazing how I've started to I reverted back. I'm saying to myself, well, what does people that I drew inspiration from before have to say about it? And then when you start to read, you start to see kind of a pattern of language, and you say, wait a minute, that sounds familiar to what I now know.
Yes.
And then you go and you do some research, and no kidding, one by one, everybody that I've looked up to isn't who I thought they were, and things that I thought aren't what I thought they were.
Yes. I keep telling people that really in this battle here, you are your own champion.
Yeah.
They tend to give us the champions down through history to look up to, and we get led in circles or into the slaughtering pen. And we've got to stop this. We've got to stand up for ourselves. And we have as much right, each individual has as much right to decide the course of the future as the guys at the top who've already decided they've done it for us. But they can't do it for us. They need our permission to do anything.
Absolutely.
And it's time we took that back, that right to give them permission to do anything. We've allowed ourselves to be herded and with this paternalistic system at the top for far too long, and it's time that we're reminded who they are. And with their own particular scientific religion at the top, that's going to get put on the back burner, and they can give their theories out to politicians if they want, but it's time the politicians stopped acting on them as though it was some kind of gospel truth.
Absolutely. Well, I've never been one to back down from a fight, so I'm now knowing what I'm up against, I'm willing to go forward.
Yes.
And in doing so, trying to, find ways, make preparations for the difficult times to come the best I can to protect myself and protect my family.
Yeah.
But you listen to some people and they say that there's that martial law is imminent. It's weeks away. Listening to you, there's 100 years war. So, that makes me think I got some time. I know asking for dates is something you'd probably try to avoid giving specifics on, but how much time do we have? What would you?
Well, we know from
how
the
would you
think
say I
tanks,
should prepare, kind of short term, medium term?
The think tanks.
And what I'll do is I'll thank you for taking my call and for the things you do, and I'll take my answer off there.
Okay. Yeah, the think tanks pretty well all are seeing the same thing. That the scenarios that they project with rioting from the public will all start around 2010. Now, it could spark off much quicker, but they themselves are tossing this 2010 scenario about. And now that the UN has jumped on its saddle once again, once they've had enough conditioning of the public with the coming food crisis, the UN is now hyping this up as going to be a world disaster unless they get total charge or control of all foodstuffs for the planet. Now remember, the United Nations, even when it was called the League of Nations, wanted to be the distributor to each nation of the food supply, and that would keep the populations in every nation down. You couldn't go above it because you wouldn't get more food. Well, this is all part of the same scenario, almost 100 years later, where they're pushing the same thing. They want control of all foodstuff, and we will be subservient to this world government for our very bread and the water we drink. Total slaves. Slavery is what it is. And we have megalomaniacs at the top. They're born in every generation. We keep seeing Adolf Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin or Lenin or Napoleon down through history. These characters are born in every generation, and this incredible drive to dominate others is one of the most potent, powerful drives there is for these fanatics. And we've got to realize they have a big club at the top, a world club of all nationalities combined, and they've all agreed long ago on this particular agenda. And we have to start exposing it and say, wait a minute, you are in your positions on our sufferance, not the other way around. We've got to put them back in our place. Or it's game over for all of us. Now we'll go on to, we have Randy from Chicago there. Are you there, Randy?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, how you doing, Alan?
Not so bad.
I just had a quick question for you. I was reading about Henry VIII, and the question jumped out in the back of my head. How did the Catholic Church, or do they have any involvement in terms of the concept of being married for life?
To be married to the what?
Say like male, female, the whole marriage. Once you're Catholic and you get married, that's it. there is no turning back. How did that come about?
It came about because of the Catholic Church started off, remember, before it was the church, as it was already an empire, a governmental empire. And it married into religion, and then that became predominant. But it still was married to governance, total governance and obedience. And it came out of Rome. Now, in Rome, you had to obey the Caesar. That was just the law. And everybody had to bow down to the law. Now, the Caesar was a god as well. You couldn't break away from that. You couldn't give any kind of feasance to anyone else without being killed, in fact. And the Catholic Church, because there was nothing else standing against it after a few centuries, like all institutions, becomes totalitarian in its methodology, and it wants to protect itself first and foremost. That's what all governments do. They're not there to serve you. They eventually end up serving themselves and trying to defend and protect themselves above everything. Well, the church was the same. So if you belonged to the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages and you broke away, you were now a heretic, and they could actually execute you as a heretic for breaking away from the church at one time. Later on, they started to do more excommunications, which just meant that you couldn't get into heaven, kind of deal. And it also meant you were shunned by your community for a few centuries. That's how that was handled. It still works in some places yet, even in Quebec. People have told me from Quebec they've been excommunicated, and even the local shopkeepers in the community are not supposed to even talk to them or their families. So, you see, all power becomes corruptible after a while, you know.
Well, somehow by instituting that law, like I've heard you talk about how the Masons have their, I don't know, I guess you could call it a breeding program, and only certain Masons can mate with certain women at a certain point.
Yeah.
By the Catholic, I mean, was there some type of, like, I don't know, breeding program to make sure they kept certain families together or bloodlines?
Oh, you'll find even within the Catholic Church, they have their own aristocracy as well, or aristocratic families within the Catholic Church. There's no doubt about that. They're very, very big, wealthy families that have come down through the centuries, working hand in glove with the Church. So in every institution, in every country, in every religion, you always have your noble families going along with their particular religion, sure.
Is there any, do you know of any old books that I could look up in terms of to try to find the history of that institution? Because in their own encyclopedia, they hint to certain things, but then all of a sudden the information just drops off.
Yeah, you have to go into books, and remembering they're all tampered, or else they have their biases as well, and some of them have agendas. But one is called Caesar and Christ by Will Durant.
Okay.
That's got quite a good history. But again, he admitted at the end, and he did the histories for the Rockefeller Foundation, and part of their purpose was to destroy old religions. And so you have to remember there's a lot of bias there as well, but there's also a lot of truth in how it started up.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Alan, and thank you for your work, and you stay safe up there.
We'll try to, yeah.
Well, bye.
Thanks for calling. And we've got Smokey from Ohio. Are you there, Smokey?
Hello.
Hello.
How are we doing tonight?
We're surviving, yeah.
Yeah, sounds like you're a Brit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was over in the desert with some of you folks. Enjoyed it. Had good beer most of the time. Too warm, but other than that, it's okay.
Uh-huh.
Are you a psychiatrist or anything, or a psychologist, or did they call you doctor or something?
I get called a lot of things, and I allow myself to be called anything, including nasty names.
Except late for dinner?
Yeah.
No, I just listened to some of your conversation. I thought I'd get in there real quick. Norman Dodd interview expresses what the Ford Foundation and the Rockefellers and the Carnegie Institute had in mind on that monopoly, which they've created.
Yep.
And they want it all, and if I print the money, I'm going to have it all. It's just pretty simple, I think, how the evil is taken over.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff they seem to be doing to us seems to be behavioral psychology 101. If you look at Sodom and Gomorrah, that's what that was. Behavioral psychology 101.
It's perfect. Yeah, we're the most studied species on the planet.
Right. We're definitely we're intelligent. We just don't have any wisdom. You know what the Bible says the beginning of wisdom is, don't you?
Yeah, go ahead.
The fear of the Lord.
Yeah, the fear of the Lord.
That.
Yeah.
You know, if we're not in Christ,
wisdom also.
If
I think
God's
wisdom,
not going to rule you. You'll be ruled by tyrants. I think one of our forefathers said that, and we weren't paying attention. We still don't seem to be.
Yeah, and again, too, you've got to learn to rule yourself as an individual.
Absolutely, yeah. You've got to have some self-discipline, and most of us don't.
But the problem is too that these characters have studied all cultures and we all have things in common with other cultures. And if you understand how the cultures work,
right.
How the psychology
if you read
of the
Source
culture
by
works,
Michener, I think he went through a lot of those different cultures and how they come about, the religions. And I thought it was very interesting. I'm a Michener fan, in case you haven't noticed.
Yeah, but once they brought in
the
big advertising agencies,
right,
like Madison Avenue,
right,
and they did. The foundations brought them on board, and many of them talked about doing so back in the 40s and 50s. Then they started to use the same techniques of advertising and marketing ideas into your mind. Yeah.
Right, the brainwashing techniques used by, actually, Freud was a cokehead. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah, I've talked about that many times.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And his nephew's actually the one that got fluoride put in the water.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that?
But his other one was a comedian in British television.
Yeah, I tell you what, did you ever see the global warming swindle?
Well, it's going on right now.
No, I mean, the BBC did it. Yeah. The global warming swindle. That was the name of it.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen it?
Haven't seen that one, no.
Oh, it's good. I think how would you put it? They've tried to eliminate it, shall we say? Like they'd like to eliminate me.
Well, what they do is they're very legalistic at the top, and they'll show you a truth, and then you won't ever see it again.
Well, they don't want to hear truth, and if you start saying the truth, they usually tell you to shut up. Just keep telling you shut up, and then hang up on you. And I appreciate you. If I'm on this long, it means you must be on the same path I'm on. I hope.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in Christ, sir?
Well, I'd have a different definition from a cultural Christianity. Put it that way. I don't go along with...
Are you born again? You know what I mean by that?
I've had my own experiences, put it that way, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how can you be born again unless you're dead to sin? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
most people don't want to realize they're dead to sin.
And you see that most folk are dead because they've never been conscious.
Well, we're dead to sin. We think with immunity before we're born again, I think.
But
once you realize all sins
against
most
God, people in today's society have never been conscious. They've been brainwashed since birth.
Oh, no. Nobody's born a Christian, sir. Nobody's ever born a Christian.
But thanks for calling in.
Wait a minute. Well, hold on.
Thanks for calling in. Bye now. Yeah, we don't need religious indoctrinations from any particular group. And the problem with most cultural Christians is they want you to have exactly the same ritual and pattern as they have themselves. And that's the problems with religion. And unless you're identical and with the same formulas, and it's just formulas, they don't hear what you're saying. And what you're saying could be even closer to a truth than they've ever experienced themselves, and it could be closer to the more ancient truth, because modern Christianity is so remote, especially American Christianity is so remote from early Christianity. The early Christians wouldn't recognize it being in America at all, because it's wrapped into a new type of commercialized culture and a completely different system. And people were born again long before Christianity came along. And that's what people should realize as well. It was an ancient saying, the born again phenomena. And it always meant you were born into consciousness, meaning you had to have obviously been dead before. That's what it meant. And that's why it says in the New Testament, let your dead bury your dead, and they're all scratching their heads and they say, well, what does he mean? It meant that those that might be walking around but are not really conscious, they're technically dead. Back with more after these messages. Hi folks, Alan Watt back with Cutting Through the Matrix. And when you see how everything meshes together, the food crisis is coming up, the big food shortages that are coming up. I've told you to look into the Royal Institute of International Affairs, think tanks that's up on their own sites, the RIIA, look it up and look into their projects on the coming food shortages. They've been working on this for a long, long time. And, of course, many of the members of this institution are also the same members who own the controlling shares in all the big five agri-food businesses. So, in other words, it's a cartel or a monopoly, a monopoly. Many make one. And they've pretty well sewn up the whole world's food supply and given us the Terminator genes and the seeds and so on to try and make sure that we can't even collect our own seeds and sustain ourselves. You can't have people being independent in an interdependent world. What it really means is you'll be on your knees to your lords and masters in this new feudal system unless you do something about it now. Now. Too late shortly, in fact, to do anything about the seeds even. Try and get seeds from people who still have the original seeds. It's still out there, unless Monsanto snaps it up and puts a patent on it simply because no one's done it before, and then fines you for owning those seeds to having them in your possession. Also look into Mark Baard's Parallel Normal website. I was looking into one of the old ones today, May the 2nd, 2007. And the article there is prepare to be transitioned into your new habitat. I think I read a bit about it on the air at the time. It says, one of the backers of the smart growth plans for major cities envisions a global great transition of humans into concentrated population centers. Paul D. Raskin, director of the Boston-based TELUS Institute, that's T-E-L-L-U-S, Tell Us, or Tell U.S. perhaps. It says, expects people to resist the great transition, so we expect to resist getting moved off your land into these overcrowded cities where the masses will be sustained, supposedly, until they start dying off. Look into that particular article. That's well worth reading. Now, for those who write to me and expect personal letters back, I should tell you that I get overwhelmed with mail here, a lot of letters and questions and answers and so on, and it's impossible. It'd be impossible if I had 10 people to try and get back to you. It's just too much to go. So I read the letters, but don't sit there and wait for me to answer. I could spend my life doing nothing but answering questions and answering the mail. And I think we've got one last caller. Is it Bob from Texas there, is it?
Hi, Alan.
Hello.
I just thought I ought to call in and remind your previous caller that before you try to take the splinter out of your neighbor's eye, you should get the mote out of your own.
That's true.
And, you know, recently, like the first part of January, George Bush went to Israel and participated in a Masonic black mass in Zedekiah's cave with the head of the Sanhedrin and the top-ranking Jewish officials. And they gave him a parchment that was made from ancient parchment in which they addressed him as the esteemed George W. Bush, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know where this came from, but is there any proof of it?
Oh, yeah, it's on their website.
Because they generally don't tell you what happens. Malachi Martin mentioned a particular lodge there that people from all parties go, including the ones who are supposedly their enemies. That's it for tonight, folks.
Hey, Alan, if you
so
go to
from Hamish and myself, it's good night. May your God or your gods go with you.